Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Raising the New Earth. I'm your host, Noah Dory, and welcome back to another solo bite-sized episode. This week, we're going to talk about dyslexia, also known as reading disability or learning disorder that involves difficulty reading due to problems with identifying speech sounds and learning and how they relate to letters and words. So basically, how to decode a word. Dyslexia is interesting because every case is really different because every cause of the case is different, such as exposure to even before birth or an early life, toxic heavy metals that we talked about in the previous episode. Toxic heavy metals can be anything. It's a metallic element that have high density compared to water and can induce toxicity even at low levels at exposure. Heavy metals can be nickel, aluminum, mercury, copper, arsenic, lead, cadmium, alloy, and steel. And these are, in our day and age, antagonizers that are hidden in all sorts of things, in scented candles, in house cleaning products, perfumes, laundry detergent, sunscreens, cosmetics, any fumes, cans, powders, baby food, fish, vaccines, and all of those heavy metals, they find their way into our bodies and really wreak havoc on our mitochondria and our bioterrain. So, in regards to dyslexia, heavy metals never settle and interact in the brain in the same way. So, for example, one child can have less aluminum and more mercury, or less mercury and more aluminum, and they can reside in different areas of the brain. And that fact on its own will influence how that person reads and writes, and the issues that intertwine with that. So what we see is that often a child that is diagnosed with dyslexia has too much mercury in the processing areas of the brain. And if dyslexia is not diagnosed early, let's say until young adulthood, then that person will have a more difficult time with dyslexia, and it will stay with them during their lifetime if no steps are taken to remove those heavy metals. And in other cases, if the heavy metal exposure um, is in the past and is not too severe, then those children can actually grow out of this dyslexia challenge to a degree that, which is really beautiful about our brain, new neurons are created and the brain adapts. So it does make a big difference if dyslexia is identified and diagnosed earlier in a child's life, and if a child receives specific tools such as tutoring, and that helps that young brain grow around the havoc that the heavy metals wreak on the brain. So it is interesting to see the connection between heavy metals and mental health, because as we talked about in the previous episode, heavy metals can cause ADHD, ADD, autism, depression, OCD, any mood disorders, Alzheimer's, focus, concentration issues, etc., etc. They can also, which is something we talked about in our podcast, they can also increase any viral or bacterial issues that may be underlining in someone's body. For example, heavy metal can be a feeding ground for strep, streptococcus A or B, E. coli, H. pylori, and yeast cells. It can create this overgrowth of multiple bacteria in the gut, which results as a condition known as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is, the people that suffer from SIBO have bloating issues, diarrhea, constipation, and so on and so forth. And that on its own can lead to nutritional deficiencies. And that can connect to the EBV virus that we talked about, or shingles, and feed off toxic heavy metals. So we can see symptoms such as foot pain, knee pain, tingling, numbness that are really caused. The root cause would be heavy metals, but those heavy metals are the feeding ground for all these other viruses and bacteria. So it's really interesting to see that we all have heavy metals inside of us since way before we were born. And the heavy metals we are born with are those that are passed through our family line, through my mother's mother, through the womb as well. And they can add up to be, 1,000 years old. And even though we mentioned that mercury has been in the earth well before then, it wasn't until 2,000 or 3,000 years ago that people started to mine mercury and gather it for different uses. So unfortunately, all these old metals that's been lurking in our system, they pose really great threats to our health. In my clinic, when I see clients, I do use several of my favorite regenerative tools. I use ion food bath. I use infrared sauna. I use something that Medical Medium compiled together, which is called Heavy Metal Detox Smoothie, which has a bunch of really, really great detoxifying elements, such as spirulina, wild blueberries, which is great antioxidant on its own, cilantro, barley grass juice powder, and Atlantic dulse. And all of these either combine together into a smoothie or a shake or a bowl, or just spread it throughout the day. Those are the elements that can bind to lead, aluminum, copper, and nickel, and other heavy metals, and help remove those responsibly from our system. So that's just one thing that I personally like using. And also, I always advise those that battle with heavy metals to try and eliminate eggs, pork, gluten, and any dairy products from their diet. And if someone does love animal products, just lower it, to half. And that can help, those dietary changes will help with the process of drawing those heavy metals out of the body. And at the same time, you can fill your body with a lot of nutrients and minerals that your body probably needs, and be able to gain that nutritional healing benefit as well. So it's important to realize that, again, this is not your fault, and this can be cleaned out of someone's system. And someone that I really like seeing their what they do in their clinic is the work of Dr. Daniel Amen. He's a psychiatrist that uses SPECT scan for the brain, which is the utilization of single photon emission computed tomography. And it's a nuclear medicine that studies and evaluates the blood flow and activity in the brain. So it basically shows three things. It shows healthy activity, too little activity, or too much activity, and where in the centers of the brain it shows that will make the difference in the diagnosis of that individual. So I really like his work as well. And brain imaging is relatively new to the psychiatric part of the diagnosis of mental health. Psychologists, psychiatrists haven't used that before, and seeing that is actually really interesting and a really beneficial for those that want to know exactly where that heavy metal sits, or that particular challenge sits in the brain. So check out his work. And that's it for today. So have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.